declare the meeting of the school board, August meeting of the school board in order. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Well, I'd like to welcome you all to this school board meeting on this wonderful, mild and sunny August evening. And our first order of business is, excuse me while I work the electronic.
Turn on your microphone. No, turn on your microphone.
Oh.
Just push the button. There you are.
No, it's on the back.
He's got it. His
he's
is on.
got it.
All right. I guess you guys can't hear me any better, but I wonder how this will go as a recording. Anyway, we have a full agenda this evening, and I would like to, I would entertain at this point a motion to adopt our agenda.
I move that we adopt our agenda.
Is okay? Is there any discussion?
No.
All right. All those approving, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Now we move to public comments and agenda, and I see the name of Cliff Hunegard.
I'd like to wait till it comes up.
Oh, okay, all right, that's just fine. We will now move to board member comments.
I don't have anything except I just want to say how beautiful Belfair looks out there with all the sidewalks and this new school year starting. I think it's really something to be proud of, and I think the next controversial slow day we'll have some wonderful places to stand to watch our high schoolers leaving for the last time. Looks good out there.
I really have nothing to say. I've been gone. So, happy.
Well, I think we ought to hear something about Alaska and that fish you caught.
Well, we brought
Maybe
back a lot of
public
fish.
business.
Butch made, or he put together a wonderful pole and reel for me. It was like a little $300 deal.
A little.
The first fish that hit my pole took the whole thing out of my hand and went down the river. And I could see my pole bobbing down the river. It was a very sad day. That's all I have to say about that.
You asked, right? Yeah.
Well, that is one of the most interesting fish stories, a real contribution to the genre, I would say.
Yeah.
Well, I do have some things to report, and Leanna was modest with respect to her report. We meet each Tuesday with Dana, our superintendent, and this is for updates of school business. And I was disturbed to learn from her that the governor vetoed one line item central to the finance of schools, which effectively locks in inequalities, and thus North Mason, along with other rural schools, has the short end of a stick with respect to budget. It is not just a matter of the legislature willing to do good things, but as a result of this line item veto, we have been the recipients of a structural inequality in the way in which money is distributed to the schools. And that will no doubt be an item in our political focus, and certainly in my role as legislative representative, I will have that. I will shine as much of a spotlight on that and urge my colleagues, particularly from rural schools, to do the same. We also were privileged this last week with my colleague Art Whiteman to have a private meeting with our National House of Representatives member, Derek Kilmer. And this was very informative in a number of ways. I wish Art was here to speak of it. I asked him specifically if there were things on the national front of which we should be concerned and for which we should be making our concerns known to him. And one thing that very much concerned Representative Kilmer was the movement to emphasize private schools. And I have personally have long regarded this as not a good idea. I am all in favor of charter schools. We have some excellent charter schools that have school boards. And I am all for innovation, etc. I will not go on at length at that. But when Representative Kilmer basically gives me a question that he is concerned about the national trend toward privatizing public education, I'm concerned also. And I must say, as a recovering prof, I have regarded always the public schools as central to the success of the republic. And anything that would take private schools, which perform privatized schools, that would take them out of lay supervision, as this board is, you can turn us out in a single election. And in the meantime, we represent your interests. Whenever we have a situation that threatens one of the main institutions of our republic, I'm a lot concerned. And when my representative tells me that's a concern, then I no longer suffer from paranoia. I am alert to what is happening. So that was great, and as also was the public meeting. I have been privileged, since the schools are not in session, and there are many in our community, as we know, that do not receive the nutrition they need for their kids. It's been a privilege for me to be part of the stopgap for that and to work with the citizens for the churches and communities that have been distributing this in the meantime to families with kids who are very much in need. And other than that, I've been preparing for the September meeting of the Legislative Assembly, when WASDA will adopt our legislative agenda for the year. So this brings us at this point to this superintendent. Would you like to make a comment?
Well, I did want to comment that Mr. Whiteman has a medical excuse for not being at the meeting tonight,
Okay.
to make that part of the record. And we're at the consent agenda now.
Do we need
Okay.
to move to
Yes.
dismiss him
No.
for
No,
today?
no.
We don't have to move that. Okay. It's just,
Well,
okay.
right. Yeah, we do need, as I understand it, to move whether we accept the consent agenda.
Yes,
Yes, you need to do the consent
Yeah,
agenda.
I
Yeah.
just, never mind.
Okay. Is there, I would entertain a motion at this point to accept the consent agenda.
I move that we can accept the consent agenda.
Okay? This, as you know, those of you who have looked it over, we have a very extensive consent agenda this evening. We have 9 items, including our endorsement of including our judgment on out-of-endorsement teachers. And I wondered if our superintendent might say a word on that, since we have quite a number of teachers that will be teaching subjects for which they have not been specifically endorsed.
Yes, and actually, this is really, this report is a result of legislative change at the national level, with the transition from No Child Left Behind to ESSA. Under ESSA, under No Child Left Behind, there were multiple definitions and ways that we could declare teachers, because of their educational background, to be highly qualified. That highly qualified status went away with the sunset of No Child Left Behind and the implementation of ESSA. And under ESSA, the definition of teachers' effectiveness and teachers' preparation to be effective in the classroom returned to the state. In the state of Washington, the PESB board declares that that is solely based on teachers' endorsements on their teaching credentials. And so these are teachers, for the most part, who have been teaching these classes very successfully for us, but under the new or old definition, returning to the old definition, we are required to let the board know that they may be teaching something for which they're not endorsed. For example, Mr. Erlacher has been teaching all sorts of social studies classes in history and psychology and sociology very successfully at the high school level. But because he doesn't have a specific psychology or sociology endorsement, we have to tell you that he's out of endorsement for psychology and sociology. The same thing with Ms. Suave, our theater, English, and dance teacher. She does have a very extensive dance background, and but she does not have a dance endorsement. So we have to tell you that she's out of endorsement for dance. So those are a couple of the examples off of the list. But we are very confident that every teacher that we have hired, including those on this list, will do an excellent job or continue to do an excellent job for our students.
So most of these teachers then are at the high school level?
Yes,
what you're
most
saying?
of them are.
Okay.
And I take it that the number of, I counted it, 9 policies here. Most of these are updates from
Yes.
One High that seem like a good idea as well.
Yes. As you know, we receive support from WASDA, your organization, and my voice keeps going in and out on this thing.
Too close to
Okay.
it.
We receive support from WASDA, and part of that support is they hire a legal staff that looks at the changes in legislation and makes recommendations based on those and court cases and other things that are going on for districts to keep your board policies appropriate and legal for staff and students and families. WASDA was without a person in that position for several months at the end of the year, so they weren't making any recommendations. And so the new person is on board now, and she has been slaving away, getting caught up. So we have a lot of updates that we've had to look at and bring to the board, and we run them through our administrative staff and our office staff and other folks, sometimes through our bargaining unit leads, depending on what the policies are, to make sure everybody is at least aware of changes before we bring them to you. After you approve them, we also share all of them with our principals, so they will share them with our buildings, and we send them to our bargaining unit leads too, so they can help make their members aware of what changes are new. But there are a lot, and that's why. So probably this month and next month too, we'll have kind of a big pile because we've only worked through part of what the backlog that was released to us this month was.
Well, I just want to comment that I would urge people, in those of you who are present and those who may be watching, these policies concern such things as emergencies, public access to district records, and like matters that from time to time concern people. And I would urge you to use our electronic facilities, our having things online, to review these policies for yourself. What exactly are the policies we have for emergencies? How often do we plan and rehearse for emergencies? And there are other things like this: medications at school, excused and unexcused absence, homeless students, students in foster care. Our schools do a lot of things that schools in times past did not do. And I think it is important that everybody be informed as to the scope and the details of what we're about. And I hope that you would find it as reassuring, as do I, that there is a rehearsal every month for some kind of emergency, so that should a lockdown or a fire or anything else happen, we have been up to speed with respect to preparing our students as best we can for these emergencies. So, are there any other discussion of the consent agenda?
I did want to point out one of the medication at school, the change to the policy 3416 medication at school is specific to the use of over-the-counter sunscreen products for students to be able to bring them to school and use them, because they are considered a medication, but they can under the policy change now, bring their own sunscreen products and use them at school, so.
I love that.
Okay.
Playing it
this,
in the morning.
uh,
So, yeah.
If there's no further discussion, all in favor of accepting the consent agenda, please signify by saying aye.
I
Aye. Opposed, same sign. Okay, this brings us to, one moment, please.
Number 3.
Yes, number 3. OESD 114, resolution to enhance school safety and security.
And that's
And is this the one that you'd like to speak to, Cliff? Go right ahead, please.
Thank you. I'm here as the OSD representative for North Mason School District, and I'd like to thank you for considering this resolution. The ESD is of the opinion that school safety and security is too large for any one district to do it, especially in our region where we have a lot of small districts in the area. So the ESD is taking kind of a forward-looking position on this and wanted to look at it as a regional proposal, a regional attempt to get everything together. I mean, the experience that you had last spring with the supposedly active shooter, I mean, you're drawing people from just all over the place. Even the park people were coming in to help with that. So what the ESD has done is they've been going around and sharing this resolution with different government agencies. And currently, Clallam County and Kitsap County have bought into this resolution and have adopted the resolution. There are fire districts that have it. Several school districts have already done it. And that was real encouraging for the ESD to see that. Just so you know, late September, the ESD is going to be sponsoring a breakfast. We're going to be calling in legislatures and fire districts and law enforcement to start formalizing what this is going to look like and what it really means to local districts and all different agencies that are going to be involved in school safety. Late October, I believe it's going to be, we're going to be inviting statewide legislatures and everybody to talk about, okay, now that we've got this structure that we're going to be doing, how are we going to pay for this? How is this going to go on? You know, there's the 1/10 of 1% of funds for mental health issues. What does that mean? How do we go about accessing that? And then also, what I'm really advocating, and Greg Lynch, the superintendent at the ESD, is willing to go to Shelton and meet with the Mason County Commissioners so that we can get Mason County involved in all of this too.
Well, and I would like to say, yeah, the Mason County Commissioners have received a letter from Greg, and Commissioner Schutte said they were going to put it on their next agenda.
So that's really encouraging. Also, we do a monthly meeting with the Mason County Superintendent, separate from our ESD meetings, because we're in different ESDs. And they were all very encouraging, and even though they're not part of our ESD, interested in joining the resolution, the MOU as well. So, yeah.
So, again, thank you for considering
Considering this proposal, and I encourage you to look at adopting it.
Thank you, Cliff. Yeah, this is an action item, but it isn't listed as one.
Yeah, it should be an action item.
Okay. If we are not in violation of any rule by not so listing it, I would entertain a motion at this point to accept the proposal that is before us and that Cliff has given us some of the rationale for.
Because I believe because this is an ESD resolution, that's why we haven't assigned it an MSD resolution number, because we are just voting to sign on
Okay.
to the resolution written by the ESD.
Okay.
I move that we support the ESD's resolution regarding school safety and security and participate in whatever happens beyond this.
All right. Is there any further discussion? I just add to what I said before. This is really important, and we were in the room last semester when one of the false shooter reports happened, and we were able to see Leanna and I were able to see our superintendent move into action with her team to address the situation. This involves a great deal of coordination to make our kids safe. It is no longer, our kids' safety is no longer simply a function of this administration of the school, but of our connection with other agencies, even in other counties that are involved. So I think that all of these things tell very strongly for why this resolution deserves our acceptance. Speaking as one member of the board.
One thing I would like to note too, we have been participating at the ESD in a group for the last 2 years for different kinds of safety and security trainings and support. One of those is the ALICE training that we have been doing with all of our staff for response to an active shooter. The ALICE training has student training pieces as well. So as we complete training or bringing all our staff up to date this fall, our next step will be letting our parents know that we're going to be giving their children the same training. One of the things parents were very thankful for in the incidents last spring was that the teachers did implement ALICE in the classroom, and it empowered the students to feel more in control of themselves in the situation. So we're very looking forward to that and thankful that the ESD helped us get there and is continuing to help us provide for the safety of our kids.
Dana, what are the
I knew you were gonna
acronyms?
ask
Oh,
me
well,
that.
yeah.
Alert, do you remember the L, ladies? Alert, lockdown, inform.
Fearless. Oh, no, it's
No,
a C.
C.
It's a C.
Anyway,
Well, I
it's,
I didn't mean to put you on the
it's what
spot.
you do. It's, I'm actually going to the training next week, if I
Well,
must be
okay.
honest. So it's on the 23rd for those of us. So we trained all the building staff during the year, so the rest of us are getting trained now. But
So part of this concerns students? Oh, go ahead.
That points out a good thing. This doesn't take away the obligation of local districts. There's still stuff that has to go on at local districts, student mental health and student safety, and all of that needs to be done. But this gives a coordination to what's going on, so that when that kind of training comes up, everybody can be involved in it, and it's not just North Mason.
And we're all using the same language, and we're all using the language from when we're talking to the police officers and fire and whomever else. So
I love that it's gonna be more streamlined like that. And then when something needs to, if something needs to change, or we need to add another precaution or what, that it would go to a kind of a bigger place where everybody can hear about it and change things. So I think that's really, really cool, really important.
So we continue our local preparedness for our school as a unit, but we also coordinate with other
Yeah.
safety
Do we
organizations.
have a motion?
So
Did we have that on the floor already?
Yeah, I know.
we do have a motion. Any further discussion?
No.
All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion passes. This brings us to item number 4, which is our budget. And we have a new budget person.
yes, everyone met Ashley Supre last month, and we're really glad again to have you here. For those who haven't met her, Ashley's going to do the 2017-18 budget presentation first.
All right.
Okay, so, I'm sure this has been much anticipated.
Welcome, Ashley. I should have
Thank you.
said that, you know.
So back in June, Kathy had presented a preliminary budget to the board. This budget that's being presented mirrors that original budget, but with actual figures that we've now received from the state and from the federal government. So to begin with, I'd like to go over what is a budget. A budget is the annual financial plan for the district. It's mandated and required by state law. Each year it has to be formally adopted by the board. For this district, it's by August 31st, hence why we're reviewing it today and hopefully adopting next week at that special meeting. This will cover the fiscal year from September 1st through August 31st of next year. Our budget has 5 funds. We have the general fund, we have the ASB fund, we have the debt service fund, the capital projects fund, and the transportation fund. The primary areas that the district had chose to work on during the budget process this year to ensure that we were safeguarding funds for these areas is in regards to certificated and classified positions, ensuring that we could fund those. The continuation of the coaching model that the district had implemented, curriculum adoption, and the cycle of that and ensuring that we're getting that new curriculum into the buildings, technology upgrades across the district and maintenance of technology that's currently in place, and increasing upkeep and maintenance for the facilities. So those were the hot items that we needed to include in the budget this year. Our budgeted enrollment for this next coming year, it's currently been estimated to be at about 2,127 students total, average over the course of the year. That's what this entire budget is based off of, is that enrollment. So if enrollment were to increase, it would be likely that we would see both an increase in revenues and an increase of expenditures. So on to revenues. We're expecting our local taxes, so this would be property taxes, forest excise taxes and such, to bring in about $4.6 million. Our local revenues, we're expecting to be right under about $300,000 for this coming year. Our apportionment from the state, so these are our state revenues, we're expecting about $14.2 million. And our special education dollars through apportionment, we're expecting right under $500,000. So our total revenues coming in for state general purposes is going to be about $19.6 million over the course of this next year. So for our state special purpose, so these are our state grants, what we're looking at total through a combination of all of those programs is about right under $5 million total. We did see increases in LAP revenue coming in transitional bilingual, in the highly capable program. These are our categorical programs. So when new revenues come in for these programs, they're earmarked for those programs. We have certain conditions that we need to meet in order to spend those revenues. So but we did see an increase in those, and so the building is working on plans to ensure that they're going to be able to spend those. Our federal general purpose revenues, we're expecting about $80,000 total between federal forest and impact aid. And then our federal special purpose, these are all of our federal grants. They're pretty much staying in line with what they have been in the past. We're expecting just under $2 million there. This would be based upon completed grant applications. So we have a pretty good idea that that's what will be coming in those areas. So revenues from other districts. For special education, we're looking at about $10,000. Our non-high participation from the surrounding non-high districts, we're looking at about $165,000. Of course, that's just an estimate until we get into the new year and determine how many of those students we actually get. And our private foundation grants, we're estimating right about $5,000 to give us about $180,000 as far as revenues come from other districts. So total revenues without capacity is about $26.7 million. Capacity is what we build into the budget that allows us, if new revenues come in, of course our expenditures would also increase. The capacity allows us to not have to request budget revisions during the course of the year as long as it remains within that capacity. Our total budgeted revenues, we're looking at just over $27 million over this next school year. So on to expenditures. So between certificated and classified salaries and benefits, that's going to take up about $21 million of our budget. Our non-salary related expenses, so this is basically our operating budgets, technology, curriculum and such, that's going to be $5.6 million for this next coming year. Our total expenditures before capacity will be $26.6 million. With capacity, we're looking at about 26, right under 27 million. So basically, the overall view of the budget to begin with is that our revenues will be, to begin with, will be slightly higher than our expenditures. But then we have to take into account that last year there was the non-voted debt that was passed to obtain the funds for the stadium. So with that non-voted debt, we have to make a payment each year. That payment is a transfer from our general fund of $393,500. We do receive the revenues coming in from the Greatview School District as their portion of that project. Those revenues come into the Capital Projects Fund, but we have to pay the debt payment out of the general fund. So after we pay that payment, we will have revenues over expenditures in the negative. We will be dipping into the fund balance by approximately $300,000. Even though we will be dipping into the fund balance, right now with where we're estimating the fund balance to be at the end of the month, we'll likely have an ending fund balance next year at still $1.697 million, or just under $1.7 million. The board has an approved policy of 4% for like a required minimum fund balance, which is just over $1 million. So if you look at the fact that even though we're going to be dipping into the fund balance by $300,000, we're still going to end the year at about $1.7 million, which is still above our minimum threshold. So the fund balance, we'll still have some room within that fund balance, which is going to be very important because we have not received all of the information necessary to sort of gauge where our budget's going to be for the next 2 years. There's still a lot of questions that are unanswered, and we're waiting on clarification from the legislature, from the state, in order to determine where we're going to be in the future years. So,
Can I ask one question before we go to the next category? So the Greatview money goes into the Capital Projects Fund.
correct,
But we make the payment out of our general fund.
correct.
And there's no way to meet. Is that what you're saying?
Correct.
Okay.
So, basically, the way that it was set up when we obtained this bond, the money coming in from Greatview is to be spent specifically on the stadium, on the enhancements. That's what their portion of it's for. So we can't technically make the bond payment for it. But the bond payment itself has to come out of the general fund. So because of that, they're basically missing each other. So we're getting the revenues in excess of the bond payment, but unfortunately, it's being handled in two different funds. So that the funds that are coming in from Greatview will be spent on the stadium and enhancing the
And other
stadium.
enhancements if there is room.
Yes, but unfortunately, it doesn't help us in the general fund arena just because of how those funds are earmarked.
Okay, okay.
Yeah, so,
So the difference is made up because we have managed our money well and we have enough to address this.
correct, correct. That,
And that's also why we have a slightly higher fund balance than the board approved minimum. But as Ashley said, as we move into this new model, we're going to have a lot of questions. We're going to be engaging in bargaining with each of our bargaining units about what their salary schedules look like, and what definitions that we have to work with from the state have not been clarified at this point. So it's a good time to have a few extra dollars because we have a lot of unknowns hanging over our heads.
exactly, the way that we're going to be funded in the future, as I'm sure you're well aware of, it's changing. There's going to be a lot more restrictions on how we can spend what we used to term our basic education funds. What's now going to be deemed as our enhancement levy. They haven't come down and stated what enhancement is yet or what type of activities will qualify as enhancement. But we're going to have to put a plan together and submit it to OSPI. OSPI is going to have to approve how we're going to spend these funds. There's going to be a lot more restrictions on our plate. So we need to make sure that we're going into these next few years with some money there to ensure that we're going to be able to keep and retain the staff that we have currently without risks of, you know, potential layoffs or rifts, which is what a lot of districts are worrying about right now.
Talking about, so.
So,
So the state gave us more money, but we can't spend it.
Not in,
not in
not,
basic
only
education.
only in ways they dictate.
Yeah.
Correct, yes.
And that's a result of the McCleary decision?
That's a result of the state's to the McCleary decision. We're, and, you know, yeah, that's, it's a result of of Bill 2442.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we are working on ways to be able to spend those categorical funds that we received in a way that will benefit those students earmarked for those services. But unfortunately, because of certain issues with supplanting basic education dollars, there's a lot of limitations on what those funds can be spent on.
So it will be something this year particularly, we'll be engaging in discussion about how we build next year's budget with our administrators, with our NMEA, with PSE. All of those groups will be heavily involved in budget planning with us at the district level. Or at least they will be invited to be.
Yes. Right. Well, it would seem to me, having at least the benefit of some longevity, Laura, you would remember this, it was not, it seems never, it always seems to me like yesterday when the budget was brought back, that we'd been allotted a certain amount of money and it was brought back in mid-year. And the thing that enabled us to pilot through that year with no rifts, as I recall, was our fiscal conservatism. This district, particularly under the leadership of this board for the last 10 years at least, has been very careful about wanting to leave money available for contingencies, not spend it on salaries or other things, always to have some kind of cushion. As I'm getting from you, we don't know how we'll be able to negotiate that in the future, but the fact of the policy has set us in good stead for this year, and we're going to be aiming to maintain that in the future.
That's exactly true. There are schools currently, even in our area, that are struggling with cuts that occurred even to them this year. And that's extremely unfortunate. Luckily, we went into this year with some extra room there with the fund balance, which has allowed us to be able to move forward as a district without having to immediately think of cutting back or ripping potential.
And another part of that is the fact that the board has been conservative and has been very considerate of the community in planning for levies, and we haven't maxed out levy elections. And so districts in our region right now, particularly smaller districts who were at that 28% levy lid, are really struggling because they were already hit this year with as much as a 10% of their budget less with this new budget plan. So because we were at closer to 21.5%, we didn't feel that same pain. But we want to be able to fairly compensate our staff as we're going forward and figure out how much money we're going to get to do that from the state under the new model, which we can't really tell yet, and and negotiate, because it will be different. There will not be a required state salary schedule as we have had in the past. There will be a minimum and a maximum we can pay, and then within that, there are a few guideline rules, but but not a complete schedule. So the rest of that schedule will be something that we build together with our bargaining units. So it will be a really interesting year.
Well, that also creates disparity between districts again.
Yes, it does. And as I have been stating repeatedly, the result of this bill is, instead of having disparities because we've bargained them between districts, the legislature has now made those disparities law. They've codified inequity. So we will be battling that. We do have this year before that budget happens, and they will be in a supplemental session, and we will be, along with some other people, very vocal about what this is doing to our kids and our staff and our communities, and we're not going to just sit there and let it continue without some changes, hopefully.
Hear, hear. One other question, since we stopped a moment for questions. What has our budget normally been? We're talking about 27 million right now.
You, in previous years, you were about 25.6. So we did see overall about an increase of $1 million. Again, about 850,000 of that was in categorical funding. So it wasn't a lot of extra basic education dollars, but we received a lot of dollars that are earmarked for specific programs.
But what we did receive for was for the staff who are covered under basic ed, a 2.3% cost of living adjustment and an additional $40 per month towards benefits. So that, of course, when we build a budget, we don't say some staff get paid one salary and other staff get paid another one. So all of our staff receive that 2.3% COLA and the $40 a month.
Okay.
Thank you.
So, we're almost about to actually wrap this up. So basically, our ASB budget, we're expecting to be around 275,000. That's pretty much where it fluctuates. They're within that threshold. Our debt service fund, we're expecting to be at about 1.8 million, which is sufficient to pay our debts. Our capital projects fund has about, we're expecting about 4.5 million in that. Of course, that is to finish out some of the projects that we currently haven't finished across the district. And then the stadiums is the big one right now. Our transportation vehicle fund, it's going to be about 68,000 for a beginning fund balance. We are not currently slated to make any large purchases through the transportation fund, so that should be sufficient for our needs for right now.
I think it's important to note too, Ashley had a meeting yesterday. We have changed whom we work with for risk management insurance. And one of the reasons that we made the change and we joined the cooperative is that with the cooperative of which we're now a part, if we were to lose a bus, and unfortunately we did have a couple of buses get hit last year and we had to replace those. With our previous insurer, we got the current market value of those buses for replacement, and since they were kind of old, that was really basically nothing. As a member of the cooperative, if that happens, they give us brand new replacement costs. So that alone is
Here, here.
So
a
when
really
you
good
say,
reason to make that change.
When you say cooperative, are you saying risk management pool?
Yep.
We're
Mhm.
back in there?
We're back
Okay.
in the risk management pool.
Okay.
Exactly. The services that they're providing right now are really top notch. We met with some individuals yesterday to include their risk manager and such, and they have a lot of really great programs that they're offering districts right now that we're definitely going to be taking advantage of.
Cool.
And so it's going to be a really, really good move.
Okay.
So that's all I have for
All right.
the budget. Budget for 17-18. Is there any questions? Any more questions?
No, we drilled you.
Yeah, I
You
think
did
we.
well.
Thank you. Thank you.
I really
So we
appreciate
need to.
Yeah, I know.
pronouncing things specifically and slowing down at certain points where we need to focus a little bit, and when you're changing your tone and changing to another subject, that you make sure that we know that, so it's not all ran together. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Well, I know this is very Interesting information.
It is. Well,
Wanna make sure everybody stays awake.
Numbers and just
Exactly.
going da 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 da. I mean, it's interesting to us and sitting down. I budget at work, so and looking at it, and it's like, oh, okay, I know where that is. But then when somebody talks about it, sometimes it kind of, if you go too fast, it runs all together, and then you're like, wait a minute. So I really like the way that you did it. So thank you.
Do you have any general impressions of our budget now that you're a new person coming in?
I think the district as a whole is at a really good place right now. I believe, just from I've gotten a chance to see quite a few districts over the last 3 years being an auditor. So I do have some firsthand knowledge of what other districts' budgets are looking like right now. And the district is solid. So what my hope is going forward is that we stay that way. So that's going to be what we're working on. We've already started talking about next year's budget, or basically the year after next, and starting to draw up plans on that because that's something we want to stay on top of as information arises.
One that is changing is the allotments that we get under we are staying within the funding model. Part of that will be still the prototypical school model, but what you get per prototypical school in certain positions is changing. And of course, those would be in positions that it would be really hard to hire at this point in time. So those are things we'll be looking at with the admin team, with our other leadership teams, to plan ahead so we can add those positions potentially as we move into next year. Support things like counseling positions, additional nursing time. We did add in this year's budget, you may have noticed, an additional RN so that we can have like kind of one at the upper campus and one at the elementaries and have more coverage for buildings. But there's a lot of things we want to look at that support our kids and our teachers. And so we'll be doing that. And now it's time for the teaching and learning update. So
Actually, we're going to
Actually,
a public hearing.
We've got a public hearing, so I'm going to announce what I'm going to do before I do it. You, the public, have been presented with our school's budget for the coming year, and you've heard the discussion that we have had. And our Washington State law requires that there be a public hearing on the budget, and I will gavel the public session to order, and we will welcome any comments for or against what you've heard at this time. So, our current meeting is suspended, and we are into a public session to discuss the NMSD budget as we had it presented. Is there any comments?
Right there.
There.
You've heard it before, but I'll say it again.
Could you come up?
No, you can hear me.
He can't,
If
he's
I'd
still-
had to run my business, my dental office, under the rules that schools were forced to do so, I'd be back in the Army in a heartbeat.
Thank you for that comment. It's true.
It hasn't gotten any better since I was on
No.
the board back in the 70s.
No.
Are there any other comments on the budget, for or against, or observations?
My only observation is I'm really pleased that we have someone from the auditor's office in the director's role now, because she brings with her a wealth of information that we might not otherwise have had access to. So that's my only comment.
All right. Well, if there are no comments, gone, the public session is over, and we have had our public hearing on the budget.
I will remind everyone that we do have a special session next Thursday at 6:30, because at that point, the board, having had the public hearing, will discuss again if there is discussion, and then vote to adopt or not adopt the budget.
Okay, so for you, the listening public or observing public out there, you have an opportunity to make your opinion known if you would like to comment on our budget. Our procedures are open, and we urge you if you have a concern, to look over our budget, which is right there before you, and come to our meeting next Thursday, where we'll have another hearing and another opportunity for you to express your point of view. Okay, we're now to Section 5, and this is information superintendent update.
And we'll start with the budget status. So you should have just stayed up there, Ashley.
Okay. Back again so soon. So now we're gonna get back into our normal budget status update. So this would be our status update for July, basically where we ended the month. So, do you guys have a copy of my handout?
No. We have this one.
It's not in the, is it on that? Is it on the overhead?
It's not yet.
It is on there, though. On here, yeah.
Oh, okay, okay, perfect. So I'm basically gonna be going over this information here.
Oh.
So, overall, what we found for July is our revenues were lower than expected and our expenditures were higher. There's actually a fairly simple explanation for that. The state held back some of our apportionment revenues because of the scare with the budget and the legislature. We're actually getting that money back here with our August apportionment. So we're going to see our August revenues be higher than expected, so it's going to net each other out. Our expenditures were higher initially, and that's just because of general projects that we have going on around the district that weren't technically budgeted for last year, but were necessary just to ensure safety of students once they're coming back to school. But even with that being said, where we're trending as a district right now is actually very solid. Our expenditures, our actual expenditures year to date, it's actually $36,000 less than where we had budgeted them to be.
Wow.
And our revenues is actually $25,000 more than what we had budgeted them to be. So that's obviously, you want to see those differences in those areas. Our general fund balance, at the end of July, we were sitting at $2.6 million. This is trending above prior year and above our average. We did have some payments coming out here with the end of the fiscal year. That's going to be dropping that down by about $600,000 during the month of August. For our other funds, overall, we're seeing that our fund balances increased during the month of July, with the exception of ASB, which would be expected. There's no students to fundraise, sports, bring in those revenues. Everything else, though, is trending up. We did receive, with the turf project down at the stadium, we did receive our first invoice for that, and we're working with the county for the reimbursement of those expenditures and such. So we are nearly getting ready to complete
Yeah,
that.
it should be done by early next week, the laying of the carpet.
Yeah.
They started rolling it out yesterday and gluing it down and sewing it together. So previously, they had completed the new end zones, which are the jumping events will take place in the end zone. So at this end, you have the long jump pits, and at this end, you'll have the high jump and the pole vault, and then just on the other side of the parking lot, kind of between the baseball and the softball fields, we've added special venues for the throwing events. So there's a shot put pit, and there's a new place, a runway for the javelin and a runway for the discus, that they're just finishing up those, but those are looking really beautiful. We don't have the fencing around them yet, but everything else. So that's really exciting. So definitely for our first game against Shelton, they will be playing on our new turf field.
Wow.
We have, in tonight's budget, we will discuss later, accepting a bid for new lights. You know, we're changing to LED, and that will happen after the season. because that's when they're available, and we don't want them trying to change them in the middle of, and then mess things up when we have a game. So they will start the light installation on November 6th, if you approve that. And we are still working on when the new scoreboard goes up. That could go up during the season or just after. And then the construction on the new buildings and the covered stadium, et cetera, seating will begin to happen in November.
Oh, it will begin in November?
That's our goal, yeah.
So with all of that being said, even with us having a capital projects fund balance of about 5.3, we're going to start to see a steep decline in those balances now as we're paying for the project. Our enrollment, we don't have enrollment for July. The enrollment goes through June. So our enrollment data is the exact same as it was last month. We ended the school year at about 2118, so 2,118.7 students. And so that's when we were looking at our enrollment for budgeting purposes, that's what we were basing it on. So that's basically our budget status for the month of July. Do you have any questions, comments?
No.
Perfect. Well, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so now we're on the teaching and learning update. Of course, we're just jumping into August here. So last week we did our returning to school meetings with our administrators. We drafted a school improvement plan that we will present to the board in the September meeting. The building administrators are meeting with their leadership teams on Monday to do some planning for their building retreats, and they'll also do some preliminary work on school improvement plans at that time. Next week, we have some new teacher training. The following week, we have some additional new teacher training and the Welcome Back to School training and institute for our ongoing teachers. And so things are happening very quickly. The first day of school is the 6th. We had representatives from each building attend a national conference on trauma-informed schools in June. They will be bringing back that information, that is sharing that with their buildings. We will be talking about that beginning next week or the week after. That will be a very important set of experiences that we build for our students and our staff, and ways we look at how we interact with each other a little bit differently, and to make things safer for everybody and to keep kids in school. So we're looking forward to that. This year we will be doing a high school math adoption. And we'll be starting to work towards doing a ELA adoption in the elementary and middle school for next year. We have a lot of those things going on. For a number of reasons, we have a couple of big conversations that we're going to engage in with our community this year. Besides, as I've said, we're going to be engaging staff in some budget-related planning conversations, but we also have some other planning conversations that we have to look at. And one of those is partially supported by the need to meet the requirements with the facilities that we have in elementary school at this point in time, and the class size requirements are getting a little tighter in a way. Unfortunately, the requirements are tighter, but since the state is not at this point in a position to fund those requirements completely, nor to fund the additional classrooms that all of the schools would need in the state to make that happen, they are leaving the requirement in our language, but have added language that says, but if you can't do it, that's okay. Which we want to be as close as possible to getting it done, and we will be this year, but we can get closer if we look at our classroom configurations. So we're going to engage in a discussion with our community and our staff about maybe we need to look at having one of our elementary schools be a primary grade school and one be an intermediate grade school, because basically if we had all the K1-2s in one building, it would be easier to have 17 kids or 15 kids in each class than if we had them split between two buildings. Because as we noticed last year, in some places where we had, yes, an average of 17 to 1, but in one building that 17 to 1 meant a grade level might have 14 or 15 students, and the other one had 19 or 20. So you see what I mean. So we want to engage in that conversation. The other conversation that I think is really necessary, and we see evidence of it all the time. And in fact, I was reading a new series of studies right before I came in to the meeting tonight, but looking at start time for secondary students. And there are multiple national studies now going on for over 20 years that say the adolescent brain cannot go to sleep before 10:45 at night, and it needs 9.5 hours of sleep. And so if we want kids to be at school and be effective, they need to start school at 8:30 or later when they're in secondary school. So the studies have looked at schools that have made that change and have done the comparisons. When secondary schools start at 8:30 or later, there are fewer tardies. There are fewer discipline issues. Kids pass more classes the first time around. There are more kids participating in activities. There are fewer accidents involving adolescent drivers. It just goes on and on and on. So we need to look at our start times and flipping our start times. So we'll be needing to engage our staff and our students and our communities in that conversation as well. So those are some of the big things.
Exciting.
Yeah.
I really like the idea of the reconfiguration, basically because it not only saves instructional materials, the cost of, but also staffing can be used more effectively.
Well, and even think about our PLCs. They try to do things across buildings, but to meet every Monday with all the first graders means they have to drive and they lose time, and it's not efficient. And if all the first grade teachers were all in one building and they wanted to meet as a team, there we go.
Yeah.
So.
Could you say just a word or two more on trauma-informed education?
Well,
or something?
we've been talking about different things over the last couple of years. We saw the film a couple of years ago about the school in Walla Walla, and we've been talking about ACEs and how many ACEs do kids have in their life, adverse childhood experiences.
Yes.
That is another way to talk about trauma, because we're not talking about the trauma of getting it might be the trauma of getting in a car wreck, but it could also be the trauma of losing somebody special in your life, whether through death or illness or divorce or moving away. It can be the trauma of not getting enough food. Or, there's all sorts of things that create that are traumatizing to the development of the brain and the development of this and the process that allows this child to be able to learn. And when we think about why this kid is behaving this way through the lens of, okay, what is going on in his or her little life, and what can we do to make that at least a little bit better so he can step back and relax and sit down and learn how to read. So that's really what we're going to be doing.
Did I hear you saying there was some component of student engagement in that?
Absolutely. I mean, well, because the deal is students cannot be engaged in learning if they're starving and if somebody was hitting somebody else in the house last night, or if they didn't have any heat and it's 30 degrees outside. Students cannot be engaged. And so we have to figure out how we're going to respond and make school really a safe place for kids. And part of that is making kids aware, helping kids understand what's happening in their lives and the impact it has on their learning. Because it's a lot, they can start to develop coping strategies when they know why they're so angry. But if I'm just an 8-year-old girl or boy in class who's just ready to explode, and it's probably because of all these other factors, but if I can't name that and identify that, then I'm just hitting out at everybody. So it's a comprehensive approach to, yes, it's help, the adults in the room are going to try to understand the kids better and create a safe place, but we're also helping the kids understand themselves better so that they can develop coping skills because, you know, as you mentioned earlier in the meeting, schools are doing a lot more every year, it seems, than they did the year before. And certainly we've all seen the chart where there's little tiny 12-point font, and in 1910 schools did this much, and now the chart goes floor to ceiling with the list of things that we do. And schools do a lot more, but we can't do everything, but we can help kids develop resiliency and develop the strategies they need to cope with whatever's going on in their lives. And so, and so that they can learn. So that's what it's about.
Okay, well, thank you very much. I have had occasion, constituents have mentioned in my presence that schools are not as good as they used to be. And I have disputed that contention in a diplomatic way, of course. And one of the things I think that is illustrative of that general principle is exactly this: how we deal with the varieties of trauma and how we enable our students to become students, to get them in a place where they're ready to engage in learning rather than dealing with a whole lot of things that prevent them from learning. And I think this is a positive thing that our schools are doing, but it's an activity they didn't used to engage in. So teaching is more complex as a profession than it was before. So,
So the next item up I have is the capital projects field lights quote. This is something that was hand carried in, so I think there are, if anybody wants them, additional copies back there. We want to be able to get them approved right away, even though, as I said, they won't start until November, but we want them to buy everything and be ready to go, so we're not delayed. Actually, this quote came in less than expected, which is kind of nice with the rising costs of construction right now. But this is a quote. We're able, because of redeveloping our existing field, we're not putting in new wiring underground for the lighting or, electric. So all of that's in place. We're using the same lighting poles. What we're putting on them is upgraded, modern, updated LED lighting systems. So that's what this is about.
well, I would entertain a motion at this point to accept the administration's recommendation for accepting the stadium field lights quotation.
I move we approve the stadium field lights quotation.
Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Okay, the motion passes. This brings us to item B, Community Linkage Planning and Message of the Month. I think the meetings and events should be fairly self-comprehensive on their face, and we don't have a message of the month to be written right off. And so, are there any discussions or comments on community linkage planning and message of the month?
Nope.
I just want to say really quick that the Taste of Hood Canal that we did for in the events here, it worked out so much better than it did out in town. And I was selling rocks, and John stopped by to donate the money to the Sandhill PTA, and we made $200 in just painted rocks. And I have orders for a whole bunch more. I didn't see the event for the Celtic Festival on there that's coming up pretty soon, but if people come and stop by and buy some rocks, the money will go back to the children, these two events. After that, I'm taking the money for myself, so, for my art stuff. But for these, that money will also go to the PTA up there at Sand Hill. I had to choose an elementary school to donate it to. They didn't let me give it to both, so I also wanted to put that out there that I wasn't choosing to do one or the other, so I had to choose one.
Well, you are a Sandhill mom, so.
I am. That's why I chose Sand Hill. And I think that starting with a good budget and a PTA, I didn't know how important the PTA was until I got to work with them a little bit. And they do such a wonderful job taking care of our teachers, you know. And I mean, it really works towards helping the children too. But those teachers do not have enough money by the end of the year to buy even just a little bit of supplies that they need at the end. So I'm hoping that a few $100 or $500 is my goal to start it off. I think that would be really amazing. So that's all I
Well,
got.
I just want to add, I was there as well. My specialization is ushering vintage cars. And this takes a great deal of training and delicacy to make sure that they arrive in their little niche undamaged. And I was very gratified in the short time I walked around. I thought the schools had a pretty good presence there. How many booths were there? There was the scholarship one.
There were total there were about 65 booths, but the Scholarship Foundation had a booth. Leanna was doing her booth. The Fill the Bus was in the middle
right.
of the event.
That's right.
So,
Yeah.
and many of the other booths were raising the money for their scholarships that they give to our students at
right.
the end of the year. So.
And the amazing firefighters, thank you, Mike. They were making breakfast for everybody, and we all got a ticket for until like 10 o'clock. You can go get this huge, like, what was it, sausage and pancakes, and I mean, they just really put it on. So it was awesome. So thanks to the group. It's awesome.
I want to particularly thank the fire department for the pancakes. I was there at 6:30 in the morning, and it was very much appreciated to have this. But my general comment is I thought the schools had a marked presence, and if you were just visiting this community for this event, you would see multiple times that people in this community are concerned about the schools by the very presence that we had there, and I was very pleased to see that.
And that $5 charge that they charged goes back to I'm not sure exactly which part of the education that it goes to, but I know it went back to our local education. You know?
To pay the fee that the park charged.
Was
They had
that?
to do that. They had to pay their fee,
Oh,
but
okay.
the Rotary also does scholarships for our students.
Right,
So part of
okay.
what they raise funds for is that.
It was a perfect day and a perfect choice to move it from the middle of town where you had nowhere to sit the whole time to a grassy field where people could sit and have a good time. It was a real bringing more unity to the community and to bringing other people in and enjoying us. So I loved it. Sorry.
That's okay.
Okay, well, here we are on upcoming letters from the board. Now, this will appear in a special thing that we do and not in the...
Well, yeah, what we're going to do from now on is our board letters will be posted on the website. We are no longer doing the Mason County Life because they are no longer distributing it in North Mason. They are only distributing it in Shelton. So we're not going to do articles in it anymore, but we will do 3 to 4 mailed to every home in North Mason newsletters a year. And the first one, Laura's article that she's working on will appear in because it will be mailed in mid-September. So your next article will go online.
Okay, and if Laura's doing September...
Well,
No,
she's
I'm
doing August.
Oh, August, okay.
But we have to, turn them in a little bit differently, so.
So wake up, John Campbell, you're on for September.
Yes.
Anybody have an idea for a theme?
No. Shall we move on to item number 6?
Okay, well, all right, assurance.
We'll talk about that at our
Yeah.
board agenda planning. We'll come up
Okay,
with a theme.
all right, good enough. Well, hearing a call for efficiency, we are at number 6, assurance of organizational performance and policy review, monitoring reports. And this is an action item. So to get discussion going, I would welcome a motion to accept the monitoring reports.
Are we taking them one at a time?
I think
Yeah,
we
we
should
can-
start with number one.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's an excellent idea.
Okay. Then I move that the board superintendent relationship policies have been complied with, and
That we find ourselves.
yes, we find ourselves in compliance with those policies this year.
Okay, is,
And that's the board superintendent relationship.
yes, all right. For those who are new to this body, we are governed by something called policy governance. And this means that there is a clear distinction between our job, which is governing, and the superintendent's job, which is the daily operation of the schools. So in this part, we're monitoring ourselves. And if you're curious, you can just click on the blue line there, Board Superintendent Relationship Documents, and you can see the things we hold ourselves accountable for and our superintendent accountable for in the way of governance. So, is there any further discussion of one? Okay, all in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. Okay, we are now into governing process documents. And if you've checked your agenda before you came here, there are about 9 separate documents with a number of subheads under some. And I guess, does your motion deal with all as a group?
No, mine was just the board
Okay, I will
superintendent.
open for discussion.
What I would like to do, though, is include both item II and III, both the GP policies, the governance process documents, in addition, including GP 8, expectation 3, executive or closed sessions, since that is actually a revision to one of our GPs.
Okay, and that's kind of how I understood it. So then let's just move on to,
We need to vote on that.
yes, I was just wondering if there were any further discussion of, we got the policies, and if there's any further discussion? Okay, hearing none. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Same sign. Okay, now, how about, this brings us to the recommendation for, did we just,
You just voted for both of those.
yeah, we did, okay.
So
All
I'm
right.
fine.
So that brings us to,
ER1.
yes, ER1, item number 4, expectations of superintendent. This also is an action item, so to get discussion going and action, I would entertain a motion to accept ER1, expectations of superintendent, meaning we believe the superintendent has performed in compliance with ER1.
I move that we believe the superintendent has complied with those expectations, and I would like to read what those expectations are for those
Hear, hear.
present. The superintendent shall cause or allow only those practices, activities, decisions, conditions, procedures, or organizational circumstances which are lawful, ethical, safe, respectful, prudent, fair, equitable, dignified, and in compliance with contract, state, and federal law and regulation, board policy, and collective bargaining agreements. That is a tall order. And I would just like to say that Superintendent Rosenbach has completely complied with all of those requirements and those expectations for her position.
I would like to add my ditto.
Mine as well.
So, having established that we're capable of brevity, is there any further discussion? All in favor of finding the superintendent in compliance with ER1, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion passes. All right, we are then to ER3, treatment of parents, students, staff, and the public. I would entertain a motion to find the superintendent in compliance with our expectations of ER3.
100%. I'm making a motion that we absolutely that we find the superintendent's performance to comply with the ER3 treatment of parents, students, staff, and public.
Okay, their discussion?
Yes, I would like to comment that those who have had a need to meet with the superintendent have come away feeling like they got what they went for, and if they didn't, they were given a reason why. And boy, is she a nice person.
All
And
right.
that you can't get a better compliment than that
Yeah.
in the middle of QFC.
That is
So
awesome.
that was really
Yeah,
pretty
yeah.
awesome.
And we might also consider this the most sought-after kind of evidence. If one is a lawyer, it's called reluctant testimony. So,
Wonderful.
is there any further discussion?
I would just like to say that I appreciate the fact that you meet with the PSC and the NMEA leadership on a regular basis. I think that precludes many issues that could come up that
do too.
have to be handled after the fact, so good for that.
And I would say that in going around the community, there are people I have not always been able to win over, and our superintendent has. And I tip my hat to her for her relationship with the public.
Here,
Oh.
here.
Okay, all in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion passes. All right, this brings us to number 6, which is budget planning. And the motion would be that, well, we accept the administration's recommendation here, that the board finds the superintendent's performance to comply with ER4. The administration also invites comments regarding the superintendent's performance. So, comments. I open the floor for a motion for,
I move that we find the superintendent's performance to comply with ER4 as evidenced by both the budget presentation tonight and the planning that evidently has gone into it throughout the year. So thank you.
any further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor of finding the superintendent in compliance with ER4 budget planning, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion passes. We are now to policy review, and this is for discussion. And our topics are E5, responsible citizens, and ER2, organizational continuity.
Well, in light of the fact that we took action on both of those policies last month, I don't have any more to add.
Me neither.
Okay.
Okay. Hearing no further discussion, we're now on to an item that many people have been looking forward to since we commenced, which is adjournment. Announcements and comments. If there's anyone in the public that feels moved to say something, this is your opportunity. Yes.
The Celtic Festival is Labor Day weekend.
It is.
People didn't know.
And it's 2 days long.
Just 2?
Yeah.
And one of our members will be holding forth.
And Joan Moore, of course, she's one of the leads on that.
Yeah.
And she's just amazing, and I just love her. So she's actually invited me to come to that, so, and be in the booth there. So.
Well, I bought the shirt, and I've got the name to go with it, but the whole outfit costs about $1,500, and I'm the kind of Scot that refuses to pay that kind of money just to look like what I am.
You can make it out of paper.
Oh, I'm sure. All
It
right.
shouldn't be raining that day. It's going to be beautiful.
Yeah.
You should do it.
That's great. So, announcements and comments, board and superintendent.
I'm done.
I guess the only thing,
Good.
I've said it all.
I think you have said it all.
Thank you.
We've done that. I just wanted to add, it was great to be a part of the festival that we just had, and I thought it was well attended. I don't know the specifics, and I'm delighted, as I've indicated before, the presence of the schools at that event. Okay, with those two things done, board self-assessment of the meeting. Director Bode will process the board's self-assessment.
Okay, this is one of our governance policies to self-assess the meetings every time we have a meeting, and there are a number of criteria here that we need to find ourselves satisfactory or not satisfactory. And the first is general meeting behavior. The agenda was well planned to focus on the real work of the board. The board followed its agenda, and did not allow itself to get sidetracked. Board members prepared for and contributed to the meeting. The meeting proceeded without interruptions or distractions. The board's deliberations and decision-making processes were public. Participation was balanced. All participated, no one dominated. Members listened attentively, avoiding side conversations. Work was conducted in an atmosphere of trust and openness, and meeting participants treated each other with respect and courtesy, and I found all of those to be satisfactory. And the governance principles review is to determine whether or not we followed these principles. Board actions occur at the policy level rather than the operational level. And yes, we did. And the board reviews policy about each topic before discussing that issue. And that was part of our agenda, so yes. In writing additional policies, the board starts with a broad statement and becomes more detailed in a logical and disciplined sequence, which we really didn't write any additional policies tonight. The board minimizes time spent monitoring past performance. The board routinely dedicates time to reviewing, improving its own process. The board clarifies priorities, values when considering potential outcomes, beneficiaries, and costs of outcomes. The board follows an annual calendar based on a plan for doing its work. The board chair helps the board efficiently conduct its meeting.
As always.
You did fine. The board spends most of its time deliberating issues, defining and clarifying its vision, and linking with its community as opposed to fixing things. That would be her job. The board supports the superintendent in any reasonable interpretation of its policies, and I found us to be overall satisfactory. And thank you all for coming and being part of it.
All right, this concludes our business for today. Our next meeting will be on Thursday,
Next week.
yeah, our next Thursday at 6:30 to complete our business on the budget, which I dealt with before. So that completes our business. I adjourn the meeting.
Alice. Lockdown, inform, counter, and evacuate.
Okay.
Wow.